Hey, everybody, this is Dr. Dave Striegel with Athletes in Dentistry, learning from sports to enhance your practice. Now, this is my first podcast episode, and the objective of the podcast is for me to talk with people in the dental profession who have been either fanatical about sports or competed in sports at a high level and see what they learned and have taken from their sports experience and been able to apply it to dentistry. So in this first episode, I'm really excited about the opportunity to talk with Dr. LeeAnne Sera, who recounts her inspiring journey from an elite athlete to a celebrated dentist, infusing her story with practical wisdom and personal anecdotes. Dr. Sera reminisces about her formative years in gymnastics and team sports, such as volleyball and basketball, which laid the groundwork for her discipline, body awareness, and unwavering resilience. Dr. LeeAnne opens up about the poignant moment her father's health issues influenced her to join his practice, as well as the indispensable skills from her sports career that have propelled her professional success. Dr. LeeAnne's story is a testament to the powerful intersection of sports and dentistry, with the reminder to be present with your patients and persistently strive for excellence. So without further delay, let's dive into my conversation with Dr. LeeAnne Sera. Welcome, everyone, to the first edition of Athletes in Dentistry, learning from sports to elevate your practice. My name is Dr. Dave Striegel, and I am here with the esteemed Dr. LeeAnne Sera. Just before I introduce Dr. Sera, I want to give a little bit of a background on the purpose of the podcast and really what my vision is for it. My background is in sports psychology. That's where I received my education. And then over the last 15 years, I've spent really immersed in dentistry, coaching dentists and dental teams on performing under pressure and really thriving in whatever circumstances they find themselves in and achieving the goals that they have. Out of all that experience came the connection. There are a lot of people in the dental community who have sports backgrounds. Either they are tremendous sports fans or they actually have competed in athletics. Dr. Sera and I go back quite a few years. She has a very deep and successful background in sports as well as dentistry. And so that's why she was the perfect first guest for me. Welcome, Dr. Sera. I hope it's okay that I call you LeeAnne.
Absolutely. Happy to be here, Dave, and what an honor, and just thrilled to be a part of this experience with you. You've been my coach in the next phase of my other career outside of athletics. That was one of the reasons why we connected in the first place.
The first time we met in person, just getting to know each other, we found this common ground of elite and professional level sports. And from then on, I kind of knew like, okay, we're going to get along just fine. And I think that's proven to be the case. The way that today is going to go, we'll talk a little bit about your path and your journey through sports and then into dentistry. So what was that like? And then we'll shift into stepping back and looking at the lessons and the things you took from your sport experience that's really helped shape you to be the successful dentist that you are and leader, et cetera. And then what are the lessons that others can take from this conversation and that you've learned over your years of not only competing in sports, but also being a successful dentist that they can take away and apply in their practices. Tell me a little bit about the beginning of your sports experience up through the culmination of it and then starting your career in dentistry.
Growing up, my father was a huge sports fan, exposed us at a very young age to everything and gave us whatever opportunity, anything that piqued our interest. I have an older sister and a younger brother. I'm in the middle. I always just had the opportunity to go watch sports, to participate. There was no real push to try one thing over the other.
You have to be this or have to be that.
No. And I, for some reason, was watching the Olympics on television with my father, and I saw Olga Corbett on the balance beam.
Oh, sure.
And I just instantly knew, wow, that looks like fun. I want to try that. And so I asked my dad, can I try that? And he said, sure. He signed me up for the local community center gymnastics class. And I just started doing that. And coaches suggested, oh, why don't you join a team? And next thing I knew, I was a competitive gymnast. And it was a great training ground. Actually, I believe that was the beginning of my foundation.
Interesting.
And because of the tremendous amount of time, discipline, it's a very, very big commitment. And I was very young, 10, 11 years old. And what it did too is it gave me a body awareness.
Oh, right.
I
Yeah.
definitely feel helped me in every other sport or any kind of physical activity I did from then on. I competed, I traveled. My mom would take me every weekend all over the place. For some reason, I feel that I experienced it, loved it, got to a point where I had to make a choice. Do I really commit everything, including my studies and school? Do I go in that direction? Or do I participate in something different? And what I started to see is my friends were doing team sports. Not that gymnastics is not a team sport. It was just a different type of team sport. And volleyball was the first one that I wanted to try. A team sport that looked like so much fun. I picked it up fairly quickly. And that was the first experience with competitive team concept for me as a young child. So that was the first foray, I think, away from gymnastics into something different. Then that led to basketball. My brother was playing basketball at the time. We were only 2 years apart. So I was making that shift from gymnastics to volleyball. And my father took me to one of my brother's practices. My brother's team was practicing on one side of the gym, and this girls' team was practicing on the other side. So as I sat there on the sidelines watching what my brother was doing and what these girls were doing, I turned to my dad and I said, Dad, that looks like fun. Can I try that? And that very moment, he said, sure, let me just go talk to those coaches and let's see if they'd be willing to let you join. And so he did. He talked to the coaches and they said, absolutely. It was part of the Japanese community. And at the time, the Japanese community was offering all these opportunities to play basketball because historically, after the war and things, they didn't really have the opportunity to play sports in school, definitely not basketball. And for some reason, as a community, everyone loved basketball. Everyone loved playing that game. So it was part of the community youth service in the Japanese community in San Jose. And it was an instructional league. And I just learned how to do a layup that day.
And were you hooked from that moment?
I was. There was something about the movement of that sport versus everything else that challenged me in a way, I guess, that just resonated with me for some reason.
And you were how old at that point?
I was, I think, in fifth grade. Yes. So at that point, a lot of my peers, they were playing from a much younger age. They'd already been playing a few years.
Yeah.
And so I started late playing organized basketball. My first team, I believe I was in seventh grade. And same thing, it was in the Japanese community organization, CYS. They have a mass practice. It's like a draft situation. Everyone comes and they put you through the drills.
Everybody shoots layups. Everybody does the drills, right?
And then the coaches draft their teams. And many, many years later, after my college career and everything, I ran into this coach and he told me, his name was Vic Nishijima, and his assistant coach was Frank Uda, who both were very, very vital in my basketball career as far as creating the foundation and really honing my love for the game because they had a love for the game. But he told me much later that that day that they did the draft for those teams, I was the very last kid picked.
You're kidding me.
He laughed and he said, I picked you because you were so much smaller than everyone else. I was a gymnast. So I hadn't grown yet and I was smaller than everyone else. I had glasses.
Not exactly the picture of athleticism.
Right. I was definitely not the number one pick. So I was the very last kid picked.
Did you even pay attention to that at the time?
I had no idea.
Oh, okay. So you didn't know when you were picked. All you knew was you were selected. Okay, got it.
Because they did their draft after all of us left together.
Yeah.
But so that I didn't know till many years later.
Oh, wow. What an interesting fact to that is you're that close to not having a place to play. Of course, everyone plays probably at that league.
Right.
Would it be safe to say that of that group of players that were drafted that year, that you took basketball the furthest?
Yes. There are many players, though, in the Japanese American leagues who have done quite well and gone on to play in college. I think there are a couple of women now who are coaching in the NBA or in the assistant coaching. So it's come so far.
Oh, for sure. That's seventh grade. So how do you go from there, just starting the game, to ultimately through high school excelling to the point where you get recruited, or maybe not recruited, but recruited certainly somewhere? Tell a little bit about the high school experience with basketball then.
So from junior high, I went to a very small private school. I think we graduated 32 students in eighth grade. And then I went to a large public high school. And I was so fortunate because the program at Los Gatos High School, coached by John Henry Mackey, he had established a strong program. There were two All-Americans who were 2 years ahead of me who played for him. He'd already had quite a bit of success, but I didn't know that going in. So I think a lot
Probably
of
all lost on you at that point, right?
yeah, and it's interesting when I really reflect, a lot of times when I stepped into some of these arenas, in a way it worked in my benefit because I didn't necessarily know what I was stepping into, and the extreme competition that I had put myself in without really realizing it. I think it actually helped me. I think if I had known that, it would have been much more intimidating, and I may have approached it differently.
Sure.
Intimidation can really change how you perform. Fortunately, like I said, I became a part of his program, and we had tremendous success in high school where we actually, by my senior year, played for the first official high school state championship for California.
Is that all levels?
Yes, for D1.
Oh,
Division I.
wow. Wow.
And the divisions, it's different now, but that back then it was.
Yeah, I was going to say it's convoluted now, it feels like.
There are a lot of divisions and there's a lot of
exactly.
changing.
Yeah.
But back then it was, I think, based on school size. And we played against who would be my teammate my freshman year in college, Cheryl Miller and Riverside Poly. Both of our teams were undefeated. Our team was 31-0 going into the state championship. Our starting lineup, all of us went on to play at the collegiate level, all five of us.
Wow, that's amazing.
Which is unusual.
Even today, that's unusual.
And we lost.
Yeah, I kind of sensed that was coming.
That game, but it was such an interesting time in women's basketball because Cheryl, as we all know, one of the greatest of all time, if not, I mean, arguably, right? It's different time now, but absolutely was doing things then that nobody was seeing. No one was seeing 105 points being scored.
No.
No one was seeing a woman who can dunk. Just the level of her skills was astronomical.
You were obviously a very accomplished player because you were one of the starters on that state final team and played in college, etc. Were you ever in awe of her or intimidated at all by Cheryl's ability?
We all knew because there was a lot of hype about her going into the game because she had already scored 105 points. She was the number one by far recruited player in the entire country. So we knew that going in, but we had a strong team. Our star, Susie Meckenstock, went on to play at Santa Clara, had a very successful career there. But we had a very strong team. We all had a very strong role on that team. We supported each other. We had a very strong star in Susie, but we also had some highly skilled players that could really hold their own on the floor. So I think we believed we had the team that could step into this challenge.
And competed toe-to-toe with someone as skilled as Cheryl Miller was at the time.
Yes. And that was back in the early 80s. The game was really evolving and changing.
It was.
And it was early, post-Title IX. The awareness was just starting to open up. Obviously, it was a great thing for all of us because we had the opportunity to play at the next level. And even that concept was never in our minds. I know it was definitely not in my mind that I would have an opportunity to keep playing.
Into college, you mean?
College, yes. It wasn't something we were really thinking about until letters started to arrive and coaches started to make contact.
So talk about that for you, because if this is not even on your radar, then at what point did letters start to arrive at your home from interested coaches?
What's interesting is they weren't at that time sending letters to our homes, but our head coach was being contacted.
Oh, okay. I see.
I do remember him bringing me into his office and mentioning, oh, this coach is interested. I had a few inquiries. I didn't have a ton, and they were smaller schools, smaller programs. I really wasn't thinking I was going to play. It wasn't on my mind until coaches, friends, other teams who basically encouraged it and said, why not? In my frame of mind is I need to go to school, I need to get an education, and I need to pick the school that I want to go to, where I want to have my college experience. That was the priority for me. I did speak to the coaches who recruited me. I know one was Pam Gill at UC Davis. She was lovely. She was a beautiful person. I didn't feel that that was my home. It has to be the fit, your college experiences where you feel comfortable, where you're going to be able to grow, and that's your home.
Yes, for sure.
But lovely program, loved many things about it. I did my campus visit, and I ultimately chose the school that I wanted to go to. And I really did not plan to play until.
Oh, wow. Okay. This is like dropping a bomb on. I had no idea that you
Yes,
did not plan to play.
until what happened is our team did so well my senior year, and we basically had exposure that wasn't really common before
For sure.
that.
Yeah.
We were on television. We were in the papers a lot. The news crew came to the gym and filmed us practicing before the state championship. And it was just a
Surreal, I'm sure.
yeah, a totally different experience. So that exposure and more conversation around, wow, maybe it's something you should try.
There's something here. Yeah.
And if I were to go back to my roots in basketball through the Japanese community, during high school, I was playing still with a local organization, the San Jose Zebras, which was like a club organization for basketball in the Japanese American community. That community really encouraged me to continue. And then the Japanese American community, Nisei Athletic Union in Southern California, I continued and I played for the Imperials organization, Misa Fujisawa, Dick Marcus. They were a big part of that organization, gave me the opportunity to really play every week, every night. We could play in some gym if we wanted to. The girls who I was fortunate to be with and play with were playing at an incredibly high level and basically said, are you going to do it? Are you going to try out? I hadn't really thought about it, but the more people were encouraging, and they were just so great about creating that network of support.
So they believed in you enough for you to believe that maybe I could do this.
Yeah, maybe I should try. So that summer, because we had a great year, we made it to the state championships. We lost by 33, and I believe Cheryl scored 41.
Okay.
We were all honored to be there, and we were honored to just be in her presence. So we had gone through that run, and that obviously created a lot of buzz and exposure for all of us. So that summer, I did speak to Coach Linda Sharp. I went down and met with her, and she basically said, I don't have scholarships at this point, because she had just recruited a strong class. And she said, if you decide to come to USC on your own as your choice of school, let me know. And so we kept in touch. I let her know after I moved into my dorm. And a few weeks later, she called me and said, hey, we're having a team meeting. Why don't you come? I showed up to the meeting. She introduced all of us to each other, because it was myself. There were a handful of other women as well who were not on the team, invited to come to the meeting. Obviously, I'd met Cheryl before. We didn't know each other well.
Once.
And there's Pam and Paula McGee. There's Cynthia Cooper.
Icons.
Juliet Robinson, Rhonda Wyndham, who would become All-Americans and icons, and who knew?
Oh my gosh.
So at the end of the meeting, she turns and she introduces myself and the handful of players who are not already on the team, who are not recruited, as, oh, and these women are going to be walking on. And I remember looking at them and thinking, oh, I didn't know I was going to be walking on, but I guess I am now.
I was going to say, usually there's a tryout maybe, but I guess in this case, she knew.
Here we go. So we went through weeks of tryouts, and I was absolutely so fortunate and blessed to be one of two walk-ons. Grueling.
Wow. Okay.
It was intense.
So how many women tried out for the walk-on spots?
I believe there were 5 of us.
5 for 2. Okay. Wow. I get the impression that it was kind of like, well, okay, I guess this is happening.
I guess this is happening. At that moment, I knew being at that meeting, I could not turn back.
So you were all in at that point.
I was all in. Whether I knew it or not, prior to the meeting, I was in.
And so then that tryout process goes on and you end up able to claim one of the 2 spots. You were selected as one of the 2 walk-ons. How did that feel for you at the moment? Was that something that was a major thing for you, or was it something else?
Oh, it was definitely major. I believe because, like I said before, I had no idea what I was really stepping into. Actually, none of us did. And we talk about that because we're all still great friends. We stay in touch.
Sure.
As a team and individually, we had no idea what was about to take place.
Okay. And you're talking about even the scholarship players along with the walk-ons. None of you had any idea what you were getting yourselves into.
No, like what would come together and what would happen. We had no idea. So I had no idea too what was in store for me, but I definitely know that all of that preparation, the community, my family, just, I couldn't have been in that situation and been able to get through it without that foundation that I had through all of them. I mentioned my older sister and my younger brother. Growing up, my sister was older, very high achiever academically, and always had a way of pushing us, myself and my younger brother.
Okay.
You can do better. That's great, but you can do better. And my younger brother always had this gift of being able to support me and help me in a quiet but loving manner. And he gave me the opportunity really to hang out with he and his friends. And I played with the boys.
When you started with basketball, didn't you?
That was really how I honed a lot of my skills that I would learn in camps and school and whatnot. Really playing with the boys and my brother and his friends, it just elevated my game. And so I think having that background and now stepping into this with these women who really accomplished in the different areas that they came from, because we were from all over the country.
Oh, sure.
Wyndham is from New York and the twins are from Michigan, but a lot of California players as well. Just now stepping into this different level of play, I'm just so fortunate. Is everything aligned?
That team ended up winning 2 national championships back to back, correct?
Right.
And were those national championships your first and second years?
Yes.
Wow. So we're talking about the progression was swift.
It was.
And I'm sure there's a lot of background to things that happened, et cetera, on that team. I'm interested in your role on that team. What role did you play on those teams?
I think the most memorable role for me was obviously a supportive role. I wasn't All-American. I wasn't a starter. There's obviously the practice players and all of that. But I believe that I brought a calming, stabilizing effect to this team. And Coach Sharp told me many years later that she knew she didn't have to necessarily worry about me. I came from a really stable, loving family environment, and she just knew I can handle myself. And I was very fortunate to come from that background. We joke about it now, but this is also why we're so close. And Cynthia Cooper was my roommate as we went on road trips. And Coach Sharp knew to put us together. We had created this bond, this trust, because we were so different and we had such different backgrounds, but we were able to trust each other. And we shared so much with each other in those nights in the hotels. And
oh gosh, yeah.
Hearing her stories and telling her my stories, I believe that really shaped and helped me in many situations going forward. And just being a part of that team, the level of pressure
oh gosh, yeah,
we had to deal with on a daily basis. And I can clearly remember my freshman year after I'd made the team and we're starting practices. And I saw the level of competition in our practices. These women were intense in practice. I would start to get physically ill.
From the anxiety around it or the nerves?
Walking to the gym, like, okay, here we go. It's going to be intense, but always in a loving way. Like the women were intense, but at the end of the day, we were family. But the level of competition, very intense. I think some of the practices were more intense than a lot of our games.
So on the real high level teams, and this goes with a lot of team sports, because I've heard it said about some of the iconic coaches that they make practice harder than games so that when you get into the game, it feels easy. Is that kind of what it felt like for you or the team when they got to games? It was like, this is so much easier than what we face every day in practice.
Yes, there are quite a few teams that we handily beat by many.
Yeah, of course.
It's just because of the talent and the level of play that they were used to.
So how did you deal with being one of the leaders or top players on your team in high school to now not being one of the top players, at least on the court? How did you reconcile with that?
It's a very relevant question. A lot of us go through that when you step into the next level, as you're used to being at the top of the previous level you came from. But I had many really strong mentors who gave me the opportunity to share how I was feeling. And I think that's so important, where if we don't have an outlet to vent or share the good and the bad, especially when it's creating tension within yourself and holding you back.
If you don't have an outlet for those emotions, then it holds you back. That's what you're referring to?
For me, yes.
Yeah.
Without the outlet, it would start to paralyze me. I was so grateful and so fortunate to have people who would step in at different times to help me through those moments. Assistant coaches, Fred Williams, Kathy Hammond, they were terrific. And some of my teammates and friends that I participated in with the Imperials organization, there was a woman, Stephanie Sin, who had played at USC years prior to me. And she took me aside one day. We were in a gym and we went off and talked, and she wanted to give me some advice on what to expect walking into this arena, dealing with the coaching at a different level. I always remember that because she took the time to help me understand some things that were coming. They came. There was a little bit of familiarity of, okay, this is what I've heard. I still had to experience it. I still had to learn how to navigate it, but that definitely helped, as opposed to me going through that for the first time and not having any background or any advice or any kind of support. And obviously my family always, my parents, my mom and dad, my brother, sister have always been there to support and encourage.
That's a theme, right, for you, is the support from your family, number one, but then number two, from the various influences that shaped your path through sports, whether it be in the Japanese community or on the various teams you played on, the travel teams and what have you. It sounds like that was an ongoing theme that maybe not all players had. You had a close relationship with Cynthia Cooper. Were other players equally bonded with each other, or was that connection unique between the two of you?
As a team, we were very close. And I believe that's why to this day, we're tight. We are still in touch, as we have all seen the surge in women's basketball.
Just in recent years.
And the current coach at USC, Coach Lindsay Gottlieb, has been phenomenal about involving us as a team, bringing us back and paying tribute to what we started and what we established, the legacy there that she wants to fulfill. She wants to obviously repeat, have her current players understand what we did and now what it takes for them to accomplish the same thing. And through this experience, we've all come back. It's like no time has passed.
The teasing, all that stuff, I'm sure.
That bond is just so unique and so priceless because of what we all experienced. And it definitely shaped our lives going forward.
When you think of the two national championship teams that you were on, were there any kind of really seminal moments with those teams, either on the court or in practice, that really brought you all together that are memorable for you?
There were many.
Maybe that's more what it is. Maybe it's just a collection of moments that build on each other.
Yes, for sure. But there were some standout moments, one of them that comes to mind is traveling to Ruston, Louisiana. We played Louisiana Tech in their home gym, and I've never seen anything like it. It was a sold out stadium. Back home, we played in the sports arena.
Not many sellouts.
Yeah, we had a pretty good crowd, especially
I'm
then,
sure.
like, relatively speaking. But we had never seen anything like that, where the stadium is just buzzing and it's just packed and they're all rooting against us. It was a pretty intense experience for all of us, and seeing what basketball meant to these people in that community and how we had to rise and how we had to figure it out and bond together. That's all we had was each other in that moment. That entire stadium was against us.
The outcome probably isn't even the point. The point is that it was such a different experience than what you all had that it gave you all a little bit of an idea of,
this is different.
This team that we're playing, this is what they're used to. That had to have been just a real eye-opener.
It was. And what was also an eye-opener on that road trip is we started to notice that we would be at a restaurant having our team meal. Kids were recognizing Cheryl Miller.
Oh, wow. Even Louisiana, huh?
Yes. And this is back in the early 80s. And we all noticed that. So it was like the first sort of awareness of, wow, now with social media, it's a whole different story. But that wasn't around then. Kids in Louisiana knew who she was.
Again, one of those like aha moments.
Right. When you really look back and you see what was happening then.
So you go through the college experience at USC, win 2 national titles your first 2 years. No problem. That's just what we do here. How do you get from there to dentistry?
Great question, because I made a choice at that point to not play basketball. So we had just won 2 national championships. I knew for myself that I wanted to have a career. I knew I wanted to pursue some professional career after college. My father was a dentist. At the time, I knew if I wanted to pursue something in healthcare, I needed to really focus on my academics. I was getting by.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you were a varsity athlete in a Division I school that just won 2 national titles. So
it's different. As a student athlete, it's very demanding. When I see these student athletes who are academic All-Americans, it's phenomenal. But for me, I knew I needed to focus and really experience what the university had to offer in more ways so I could feel and graduate with that total experience that I really went there for in the first place. I needed to focus and get my grades up and get serious about school so that I could pursue that next step.
And so your father was a dentist, so that was your exposure to dentistry. You knew a little bit about what it was like, so it was not foreign to you to see yourself perhaps pursuing dentistry. Did you immediately go work in your dad's practice, or did you go take a different path out of dental school?
He discouraged me from joining him.
Really?
Yes, because he wanted me to experience other ways of doing things prior to joining him. He was a very progressive man, never wanted to put me in any kind of position that wasn't my choice as well. Like, he was very encouraging and didn't really want me to feel like I had to do anything. It was always my choice and really helped me to trust my instincts and my gut, which was hard. Because sometimes you want the answer, right? You want to be told. He was really good about allowing me to figure it out. But he did many times have these moments of advice that did help me with those decisions and help guide me. And what he really felt strongly about was stay in LA. I was teaching at the dental school after I graduated. I became part-time faculty and taught, which was a great experience for me. And then I was associating with a couple of my professors in their practices. And then what happened was my father got sick. That started the process of me coming up to help him. And it was about 5 years after I had graduated. So I was teaching and working for 5 years, and he developed kidney failure. So I was his donor, and we did a kidney transplant at UCSF. And that was a life-changing event.
That is something I did not know.
Yes. So we were bonded, very bonded, not only physically, but just
in every other way. We as father-daughter, but
right.
yeah.
So we did the kidney transplant. It was successful. I commuted for a bit from LA to Santa Clara, where his practice is. And after a couple of years of doing that, it was clear I needed to make that choice to leave LA and to join him full time. And we worked together for 11 years and had a ball, the greatest time working together. And he passed, and I continued the practice.
That
And
you still are in today.
Here I am. Yes.
And here you are. And I will say, carrying on your father's legacy, I think in a very honorable and successful too, but honorable way. Did you ever feel any pressure to live up to his example or to live up to what he had done?
Yes, absolutely. There's not a day that goes by where a patient doesn't mention my father. I'm working on the fourth generation of his patients. And every day I see someone who was either his patient or the son or daughter or great granddaughter or son of his patients who he started with. I'm so incredibly grateful and honored to have that, because it's really become more than a practice. It's taken on a life of its own. And that applies to my staff as well. The team we built on trust, and for many hours and hours talked about team concept and how we apply all of that from sports to this current team and how we serve our community, because that's what we're doing. We're serving these patients.
I couldn't have scripted a better segue to kind of the next question that I have for you, and shifting into the lessons. What have you been able to take from your sports experience and applied it to your professional life as a dentist and owner of a dental practice?
The first thing that comes to mind is resilience. Resilience and accepting challenge and change. I really strongly believe that sports has helped me hone that skill of being resilient and being able to adjust on the fly in this split second moment. Sometimes it's instinct.
The time you have to adjust in sports is probably different than the time you have to adjust in dentistry.
The experience, what goes through your mind and what the training of your mental state is pretty much the same. And that you have to be able to have the discipline to stop yourself, calm your nerve, and feel like you can make that decision and trust your instinct and your gut based on what you know, what your education and your training is. And I think too, also the urgency I'm talking about is not necessarily the dentistry per se. It's that connection with the patient who is in the chair and dealing with sometimes an uncomfortable situation or pain or what have you. And in that moment, you have to be able to calm and address and sustain the trust that they have placed in you. And that's not always easy. So that's something I believe from sports and athletics. It's such a training ground in so many ways, but that was one thing that I feel for me has helped tremendously.
We've talked about this over the years, about how when things are going well, when the patients are saying yes, the patients are happy, team's happy, everybody's working well together, that's obviously a special place and great synergy. It's not always like that, though. Depending on the sport. I think it was maybe at one of those moments that we met.
Right.
But depending on who you ask, a lot of people I've spoken to over the years will tell me that the amount of time they're in that place where everything's hitting on all cylinders is not that often. A greater percentage of the time, something's not hitting on all cylinders, either a person or a piece of equipment or the environment around you, the economy, whatever. How have you taken from your sports experience to the resiliency that you're referring to? How do you maintain confidence, or how do you maintain hope in those situations? Because the answer is not always clear. In sports, the answer comes quickly.
Right.
In dentistry, the answer doesn't always come quickly, or the feedback.
For me, I believe there's two things. One is trust, and the other is the coachability.
Okay.
So I had to learn to trust, and also learn to trust who I've surrounded myself with, my team. if I were to go back to my high school teams, my college team, that's really what we had. We had this tremendous amount of trust with each other. And I think because of that, that's always the bar that I was trying to create with whatever team I wanted to create for my career. And that trust, once it reaches the level of almost automatic, like you almost don't have to think about it, then that's when the alignment would just start to happen in that synergy, in that zone. We all talk about zone. And when we're in the zone, it's so palpable. You feel it. Everything starts to click. But when that doesn't happen, when things come up, for me, what helped me the most was being able to recognize, okay, I need to go to the bench. I need to talk to the coach. What am I doing wrong? What's happening? What am I not seeing? And I think in all sports, one of the things that makes an athlete stand out is whether they're coachable and whether they're humble, because the ability and the coachability is only going to make them better. And when I figured that out, dentistry is similar. This is now the game I'm in. How do I now create the ability to serve these patients in this community at the level that I want to? If that's my goal, how do I get there? And it's just going back to those same concepts of create the team around you and also be able to ask the questions, seek out coaches, seek out people who can help you get there. Maybe I would eventually figure it out, but if I can have someone help me
accelerates that.
Get there faster, why not? And that's what led me to seek out someone like yourself. And especially like we mentioned earlier, that's where you and I connected and resonated is we love sports. We have that passion for it. And it was so easy for you to explain things to me. And we would have the analogy of this is what happened on the court.
Right.
How do we apply that to?
Yeah, you just had a turnover.
Right.
And what do you do next? Using that analogy, I think, is nice and makes it easy for someone who has a familiarity with sport to be able to relate to what we're talking about. And also just the process of pursuing excellence. Another aspect of what connected us was your desire to pursue excellence.
Yes.
I'm curious, though, when you say that the trust and coachability is at the heart of that team concept that allows you as a team to get into that zone. When it's not there, how do you foster it? What have you found has helped you take a team or maybe a team member who is new, doesn't understand yet what that is for you? How do you incorporate that person into it and how do you build it?
I would say what I found has worked is approaching that team member if they're new or maybe they're not getting it. They're not quite with everyone else at the level that they need to be. Approaching that with compassion and understanding that, hey, I get it. We know this may be different or new to you. It's a different concept, but this is what we're about. This is at the core of what we're trying to accomplish. And really trying to have a common understanding. And then if that works for you, great. If this is something that we can all experience together, let's do this. And I think once that's established, then the rest starts to happen. And also what's important is I have to be and live that. I can't just tell someone, this is what I need you to do if I'm not myself giving my effort to live that way and to pursue and show up to work the way I would want everyone else to. We start every morning when we all get to the office. I hug each one of my staff members or my teammates. It's a hug in that, hey, here we are. Let's do this. I got you. And there's so much that you can tell from a hug. You feel each other's energy. And I know if someone's struggling that morning or life happens, then we know.
Provide some support if someone is, I can give a 5 out of 10 today because of this reason. It allows you to rally around someone who's going through a tough time, which we all know happens. And I think sometimes we forget that people don't leave their lives at the door.
Me included.
Yeah.
Right. All in this.
That raises an interesting question around vulnerability and transparency.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
there are plenty of dentists I've met over the years who really have pretty clear lines over what they're willing to communicate or share. And I don't know that there's a right way or a wrong way, but What have you found works for you with respect to that vulnerability and transparency if something is distracting you or on your mind? Might be not even practice related. Where do you draw that line?
That's a good question because there is a line, but I think for the most part within my team, because we've been now together for many years, we have a very good understanding of what we're all going through. Because we've built that level of trust, we can all draw the line with each other. And I think that we have a fairly good understanding of when it's time to maybe reach over that line a little bit and try and pick someone up when they need a little time or when they need some time on their own.
And I know it has happened, I think, pretty rarely for you, which is, I think, very fortunate that when there's a team member who is not able to either elevate to the level you need them to, is just not a good fit for the practice, how do you handle those situations?
I personally believe that those things always work themselves out. Of course, if there's any difficulties, they're addressed, but I really try to allow them to figure that out. And I think going through that process that way, then we both get to a point where there's very little to almost none, I would hope, animosity at the end of the relationship where we've reached an understanding together that this has been great, but it's time.
Okay.
For whatever reason.
Sure. And is that something that for you comes through repeated communication along the way? Or when you say you allow them to figure it out or allow it to work itself out, where does the communication, the need to have touch points with people fit for you? How does that dovetail?
I would say that's more a gut reaction for me. I just know when it's time. I don't know that that's the best way. I'm the first to admit it, that it could probably be on a more regular basis. But the way I know I am and the way I flow better is when I feel how someone's feeling to me. And I'm open to feedback from team members.
That's an important explanation or understanding for you of how you navigate life is to a large degree connected to energy. And the energy you bring, as well as the energy you receive from others.
Right.
It can be kind of vague and like, well, how do I do that? I don't know. It's something you do other than you're open to it. But knowing when to have those clarifying conversations and when to ultimately make the decision that I need to make a change, that I find is something that doctors and dentists often struggle with is when. How is a whole separate thing we all find challenging, but when to shine a light on something and then when to escalate it to the point where a decision has to be made. So looking back now on your sports experience, the resilience piece is really important. And I think that's a very powerful tool, if you will, that you took from your sports experience. Is there anything else that comes to mind that you feel like sports really prepared you for being a successful business owner and dentist?
Sure, losing.
Oh, and okay, so talk about that a little bit.
The adversity aspect, I think sports helped me hone that ability to try and bounce back from adversity when things don't go your way.
So give me an example in dentistry that you have found. What is one of the more common situations in dentistry that this relates to?
I think probably the most impactful emotionally would be team dynamics, what we were touching on earlier. Yeah. When it becomes difficult or when teams not vibing or gelling for whatever reason, that's challenging because it affects everything we do. It affects our day. It affects everyone's energy. So that's stopping and trying to step outside of that. What's not working? How do we adjust our approaches? How do we adjust the playmaking? Like the crossover from athletics is the game book.
Yeah, the game plan's not working, but I could see in sports, it's a fairly unemotional question to ask or to approach, which is what's working, what's not working. That's woven into sports. Throughout a game, practice, it's all geared to what's working, what's not working. Maybe not so much asking those questions in dentistry isn't quite as obvious, or maybe not woven quite as easily into the flow of a dental practice. How have you bridged that gap? Because it's very much part of pursuing excellence is getting that feedback. So how do you weave feedback into your day-to-day in the practice? Let's say it's a patient leaving the practice.
Right.
oh, that's a bummer. I like them. Or they've been with the practice for a long time. That's a family that I've known for decades. They've left. Huh. That's feedback. Some dentists would like, I don't know. They didn't talk to me about it, so we move on. Or I'm so busy, I don't have time to circle back. Others would do something else perhaps with that information. That's just an example. But how does that show up in dentistry, the adversity and the losing that you mentioned in sports?
I think a similar example that you mentioned, or when something doesn't go right as far as a procedure or a treatment plan. Oh, shoot, that didn't go as planned. I think that happens first, which can lead to a patient exiting the practice because things didn't go quite as planned. I would say that's probably the most difficult and the most prevalent thing going wrong. And it's just retrace your steps. Where did I go wrong? And we're human. You have to realize that human aspect of what we're doing. And of course, excellence, perfection, all those things, which is what pushes us. But we also have to be realistic and be able to understand when things don't go quite the way we wanted them to. That's also realistic. And that's also part of this whole process, that what do we do with it? And I think the athletics has really created that kind of arena and foundation to make that a mindful habit.
Where it's comfortable, it's not foreign or something to be afraid of.
That's where we grow the most and learn the most, is when things don't go our way. It gives you an opportunity to examine and, oh, wow, okay, that's where I could have done this or I could have done that, or it gives you the opportunity to evaluate and question.
How have you become comfortable with that? Because that process is at the heart of pursuing excellence. How did you manage to get comfortable with it? Because it's not comfortable.
It's not. It's taken time. It hasn't been a natural and easy process for me. It just got to a point where I knew that if I didn't figure out how to do that, I would not be able to achieve what I wanted to.
Okay. So that's really at the heart of it, is that's where I want to go. If I don't open myself up to look at this, that takes courage, right? You mentioned humility.
And being uncomfortable. Stepping into that uncomfortable space is the only way I'm going to get there. Once I started to understand that, okay, because I put myself in that uncomfortable situation, I gained so much more after having put myself there that I wouldn't have done if I just kept bouncing around and dancing around the issue at hand. It took time, but it was something I had to learn. But that's where, like I said, having someone put that in front of me and talk to me about it, such as yourself or a mentor or someone who you respect and admire, that can give that look and that view in that mirror and put that in front of your face to give you that feedback is tremendous.
So as we wrap up our conversation here, we're going to end on a little thing I call the 2-minute drill. But before we go into that section of our conversation, is there anything else that has come to mind since we've been talking that you feel like, for someone who is in a dental practice, either as an associate or as an owner, and not everything's going as well as you'd like, what advice would you give to them as a place to start to begin to turn things around?
I think the most important lesson for me that changed my trajectory within my practice of dentistry was once I figured out how to become present in every interaction that I had with my teammates, my patients, even vendors or other supporting staff that you have to work with when you run a dental practice. Once I figured out that being truly present made all the difference, it became less work. Once I was able to become present. For instance, like with a patient, if we're talking about a difficult treatment plan or having to talk to them about something they may not have wanted to hear, as long as I'm with them and completely present, understanding where they're coming from and their fears or their questions or their uncomfortable feelings about something, it takes away a lot of the difficult emotions from it. And so if I were to give anyone, like a new upcoming associate dentist, any kind of advice, I think being present really summarizes all of the things that we've talked about. dealing with all the adversity and the resilience and all those things don't really matter if you're not present. You can think about it, you can apply it, but if you're not truly present in that moment and just dedicating your heart, your energy, your mind at that time to what you're trying to convey or what you're trying to accomplish, it just makes it a lot harder and it takes longer to get there.
I love that. That's a good way to wrap up that portion of our conversation. And now we're going to shift into what I call the 2-minute drill, which is, just as it implies, it's as close to 2 minutes as I can get it. So I'm just going to ask you rapid fire questions, and it may have nothing to do with dentistry, but just rapid fire questions as a fun way to end our time today. Okay. All right. I'm starting the clock now. All right. When you were an athlete, when you were on the basketball team, what was your go-to pump-up song?
Michael Jackson's Thriller.
All right. Love it. That was one of mine too.
It was actually his whole album.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Fantastic album. If you were able to compete in the Olympics, besides basketball, what sport would you compete in?
Ooh, gymnastics.
I thought that might be the case after you explained your gymnastics history. What's your favorite healthy snack?
I love healthy food. There are a lot of things I like. So
what's your favorite health food then?
kale.
Okay, that's not what I hear often, but that's awesome. We are definitely in California. That's for sure. What's the last book you read?
The last book I read, I think I've gotten away from reading entire books, which is something I really would like to get back to. But I would have to say Phil Jackson's book about how he coached that phenomenal Chicago team. I just really loved the way he talked about how he had to manage those players.
All the personalities and
Scottie Pippen,
etc. Yeah.
And how he brought in the spirituality and the meditation and
Yep.
and the coda.
Really ahead of his time.
Really ahead of his time. That really resonated with me and it opened my mind and changed my thinking.
That is a fantastic way, I think, to end. And so that finishes up our 2-minute drill. LeeAnne, I just wanted to thank you again for taking the time to spend here today with me, talking about your journey through basketball and then into dentistry. It's been a real pleasure. I learned some things I didn't know. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And for anyone who might be interested in learning more about Dr. Sera, why don't you share with our audience where you practice dentistry and the area that you are most interested in these days?
I practice in Santa Clara, California, and I also have a part-time practice in Honolulu, Hawaii. I'm a general dentist, but I love the technology and the implant dentistry, I think, has really revolutionized what we do. That's something I really enjoy doing, but I really do enjoy all aspects of being a general practitioner and really whatever is in the best interest of the patient, we'll find a way to do. That's really where my heart and soul is as far as my practice.
Again, that's perfect. Thank you very much for joining me today. And that concludes our first edition of Athletes in Dentistry. So have a great day.
Thank you. And you have a great day as well, Dave. Thank you for everything.
Thanks, LeeAnne.